Hello everyone and welcome to The No Show. I'll be your host Nathan Orenstein, and today I'm going to be ranking every sci-fi movie directed by Steven Spielberg in honor of his new movie Disclosure Day releasing. Now, Steven Spielberg is a man who needs absolutely no introduction, so I won't waste my time or yours. He's directed 9 science fiction films up to this point over his half-century long career. Let's get to ranking them. At number 9, I've got Ready Player One from 2018. This is the only film on this list that I would describe as a bad movie. It takes place in a dystopian future where pretty much the only way to escape the misery of real life is to exist in this virtual reality video game. The creator of the game dies, leaving behind a secret in the game itself, and whoever finds the secret gets ownership of the company. So obviously the bad guys are going to be the big corporation who wants to fill the game with advertisements, and the good guys are going to be the young underdogs who want to preserve the sanctity of the game. Classic stuff. Ready Player One is honestly an amalgamation of everything wrong with blockbuster filmmaking in the current day, and I think it only got a pass because it came out 8 years ago before things got really bad. But I watched all of these films in the past few weeks, and trust me, this did not age well on a rewatch. There's the extreme over-reliance on CGI, there's the generic story with mediocre writing and forgettable characters, there's the insistence that it's nearly 2.5 hours long for no reason, and worst of all, there's the jamming of pop culture references down your throat at every opportunity. Marvel has normalized filling movies with insipid cameos, but this film is literally built upon pop culture references, seeing that it largely takes place in a virtual reality that seems to feature every existing IP. I mean, on the poster alone, there's the Iron Giant, a Gundam, and the DeLorean from Back to the Future. This is a film that is constantly just jangling its keys in front of your face, and I know that works for a lot of people, but I never took the bait. And if you don't take the bait, you probably aren't going to like this film. It's always a bit of a shocker remembering that this is indeed a movie by Steven Spielberg. At number 8, I've got The Lost World Jurassic Park from 1997. And yes, the title of the sequel does indeed come before the title of the franchise for some reason. Anyways, this is the first sequel to Jurassic Park, which we'll get to later, and it's the only one directed by Spielberg himself. Turns out John Hammond, the owner of Jurassic Park, had a second island with a bunch of dinosaurs on it, and his former company, InGen, wants to exploit those dinosaurs to basically make a second Jurassic Park. So InGen sends in an armed team to go in and extract the dinosaurs, and Hammond sends in Ian Malcolm and a few others to document as much as they possibly can, and the two sides eventually come into conflict, but then must work together to survive the island full of dangerous dinosaurs. The Lost World is a fine enough dinosaur movie, but it seems to have a distinct misunderstanding of what made the original so good, which is especially strange considering the same writing-directing tandem made both of them and only 4 years apart. This is largely just a survival scenario from start to finish, without much sense of wonder or an interesting ethical dilemma at its core. There are too many characters to care about any of them, and they even took all the fun personality out of Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm, who was much better served as a side character than as a protagonist. What's left is, admittedly, a pretty cool dinosaur movie, but with pretty much nothing going on outside of that to make you feel or think anything. There are some genuinely thrilling moments here that rival some of the best moments in the original film, but everything in between is so bland and lacking in any sort of personality or character. A good time if you just care about people on an island with dinosaurs, but I can't recommend it if you want anything deeper than that. At number 7, I've got Disclosure Day from 2026. Unfortunately, the newest entry in Spielberg's catalog doesn't rank very highly, but it's far from a bad movie. It's about a man who acquires decades of proof that the US government has been covering up several instances of alien contact on Earth. He threatens to disclose this information to the entire world, which the government doesn't like, and they try to hunt him down. Meanwhile, a meteorologist has a strange incident on live TV in which she seems to be speaking in an alien language, and she ultimately joins the whistleblower's cause. On its surface, Disclosure Day is a relatively simple movie that's pretty much one long chase. But once you start getting into the nitty-gritty with all its ideas, that's when the movie really starts to show some cracks. This is a very busy film, presenting all sorts of ideas to keep up with and to try to understand as this movie barrels forward at a pretty brisk pace. I don't think it's overwhelming necessarily, but it is a lot to grasp, and I don't think the movie does a great job at delivering complete ideas. An idea might make for an interesting scene or conversation, but it doesn't always find a very good place within the story and mythos that this film is trying to deliver about how alien life and technology work in this version of the universe. It's probably the boldest film on this entire list. It just doesn't really deliver a complete package. But when you do step back a bit and get out of the weeds, this is a fun, blockbuster-type sci-fi film that managed to keep me engaged and on my toes for 2.5 hours. There are some great action set pieces here too, there are some genuinely wondrous moments, and there are a lot of interesting ideas, even if they don't all work. This is now Spielberg's 4th take on Aliens, and each of these films has a very distinct flavor to it. And while I do think this is the weakest of the bunch, I did still have a good time with it overall. At number 6, I've got War of the Worlds from 2005. This is a modern retelling of the 1898 classic novel by H.G. Wells, in which a man has to protect his young daughter and teenage son when aliens invade Earth in giant war machines. At its best, War of the Worlds is a really effective apocalypse film. There is a legitimate sense of dread when these war machines start attacking people and destroying entire cities. We're following just one family throughout the film, but Spielberg is really able to imbue a sense of scale that makes the severity of the situation that much bigger. It's exciting and helpless and feels as dire as an alien invasion probably would in real life. But there are a few things that hold this back from being a great film. For one, the main family is just not very likable, led by a Tom Cruise performance that serves as a good reminder of how annoying he was during the mid-2000s. His infamous couch-jumping interview with Oprah was actually part of his press tour for this movie. Second, this thing features a lot of the corniness that Spielberg has taken some heat for throughout his career. I don't often take issue with that sort of thing in his movies, because a lot of the time the filmmaking supports it. But it feels especially weird in a film like this that, like I said, is genuinely helpless and terrifying at its best moments. And finally, the pacing for this movie is pretty brutal. The second half of this just grinds to a halt, which is especially annoying because it's when we get introduced to a great Tim Robbins character. My enjoyment watching War of the Worlds really fluctuated from beginning to end, as I was pretty frustrated at its weakest moments and genuinely blown away at its best. Overall, I think it evens out as a good movie, just a very flawed and often frustrating one. At number 5, I've got AI, Artificial Intelligence from 2001. This is about a robot boy named David who is the first of its kind programmed to love. A couple quote-unquote adopts him to help them get over the loss of their real son, who has fallen into a seemingly hopeless coma. When their son surprisingly wakes up, David is forced into a very difficult situation. Earlier I said that Disclosure Day was the boldest film on this list, but I think that distinction might actually belong to AI, which was not something I was expecting going into this film. It touches on some real heavy-hitting themes, like what does it mean to truly love someone, and what are the ethics of man playing God and creating intelligence with emotion meant to serve us. Couple that with the fact that our protagonist looks like a 12-year-old human boy, played masterfully by legendary child actor Haley Joel Osment, and it makes all of these questions hit even harder emotionally. The film itself is also a whole lot bigger than I expected, opening with David being raised and loved by this family, but eventually taking him on a journey through a dystopian society that rivals some of Spielberg's best adventure films. For me, this opening section just never really sold me on the film, taking about an hour for me to really get invested. But once David begins the journey that I mentioned, I felt like the movie turned into a genuine masterpiece for an hour or so. The world that Spielberg created here is so fleshed out and visually astonishing, and this is also where David teams up with Jude Law's Gigolo Joe, who is one of my favorite characters of any of the movies in this ranking. Seeing Haley Joel Osment and Jude Law together at the peak of their powers in the early 2000s is fantastic, and the dynamic between the two makes for a very interesting and entertaining pair. I feel like the ending is probably a bit of a divisive one, coming to some very interesting thematic and narrative conclusions, but really taking its time in the process. Like with War of the Worlds, I feel like I kind of need to average the movie out as a whole, and again, I think this lands at being good, not great. It has left me with a lot to think about though, and I could very much see this improving with a rewatch. At number 4, I've got Minority Report from 2002. From here on out, I think all these movies are pretty great, and I describe them all as essential Spielberg films. Minority Report takes place in the future where there is now a pre-crime unit in the DC Police Department, which relies on psychics to tell them when and where murders will happen before they actually do. Things get interesting when the so-called precogs foresee the chief of pre-crime committing a murder himself, causing him to go on the run and figure out what could possibly have caused this prediction. As you can tell from that synopsis, Minority Report is honestly pretty goofy and falls into a lot of the same logical pitfalls that most time travel movies do with its whole seeing the future plot device. That being said, Minority Report is also cool as hell and leans into its goofy plot with all the seriousness of both an intense chase film and a neo-noir. Tom Cruise is perfectly suited for a film with this vibe, and he's excellent here, which checks out because so much of this film reminds me of the first Mission Impossible film. Cruise being on the run in a futuristic sci-fi world is fun enough as it is, but it's the mystery elements and complex narrative that really sold me on this one. The film feels like it's barreling towards an inevitable climax, but it really subverted my expectations in the back half for sure with the direction its plot decides to go. I will say I wasn't crazy about the blown out lighting throughout this film, a look that admittedly does fit the grimy feel of the movie, but really doesn't look the best in my opinion. But that's hardly a big deal when the rest of the film is so great. At number 3, I've got E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial from 1982. E.T. is about an alien who gets left behind on Earth, who ends up being taken in by a boy named Elliot and his brother and sister. But things get dicey when the government comes looking for E.T., and when E.T. starts to get sick from being away from home for too long. E.T. is my most watched movie on this list, and that's because I've seen it at all different stages of my life, seeing that it is the only sci-fi family movie Spielberg's done. And while this movie is for kids first and foremost, I find it just as great watching it as an adult. Spielberg is one of the best filmmakers at evoking a sense of wonder and movie magic, and I think E.T. is maybe his best example of that. E.T. is from a different planet and can do things that no human can, and the magic of that seen through the eyes of Elliot is really kind of beautiful. This also features maybe my favorite cinematography of this group, and it helps enhance that wondrous sense of discovery super well. The movie's fun and charming and magical, but it gets pretty upsetting when things start to go wrong for E.T. and Elliot. It really is an emotional ride from start to finish, especially because the movie does such a great job of making you fall in love with E.T. This is definitely the simplest film on today's ranking, which makes sense since this is a kids movie, but I think it does more than enough to elevate things in a way that can appeal to literally anyone. At number 2, I've got Jurassic Park from 1993. What is there to say about Jurassic Park that hasn't already been said? It's probably Spielberg's most famous film, and it might be his most beloved too. If you're unaware, it's about a wealthy businessman who uses cloning technology to make a theme park filled with dinosaurs. He brings along a few scientists, along with his grandchildren, to give them a sneak preview of the park, only for the security measures to fail and the dinosaurs to escape. Jurassic Park is basically everything you could ever want out of a blockbuster science fiction film. It's got that magical sense of discovery that I keep mentioning Spielberg does so well. It's got plenty of thrilling and downright scary moments. It's got a great cast of memorable characters, and it even gives you a lot to chew on with its depiction of the ethics behind such extreme scientific advancement. It's got some of the most iconic music in film history. It's one of the most quotable films ever. Oh, and it's got giant animatronic dinosaurs that are still the coolest depiction of dinosaurs we've ever gotten. There are now 7 movies in this franchise, but none of them hold a candle to this original one. I don't really know what else to add about this one. It's a classic for a reason. And finally, at number 1, I've got Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, Spielberg's first ever sci-fi film. It involves an everyday man who experiences a close encounter with a UFO one night. Afterwards, he has inexplicable visions and is mysteriously drawn to an isolated location. To me, Close Encounters is a perfect film, and it was a no-brainer for the top spot on this list. It manages to perfectly blend a feeling of wonder and a legitimate fear of the unknown, and it culminates in a finale that can really only be described as magical. I know I've been throwing around that word a lot for Spielberg, but the last 20 minutes or so of this film are truly special and unlike anything I've seen before. Richard Dreyfuss, fresh off of Jaws, is once again fantastic here as normal guy Roy Neary, and his character acts as the perfect relatable centerpiece for a story so massive in scope. He's definitely the main character, but the film also follows a mother who lost her son to an alien abduction, and a scientist who's trying to understand strange phenomena from around the globe that seem to be linked. The structure allows for a story that really captures a whole range of feelings and perspectives, with moments ranging all the way from fun and goofy to genuinely tense and frightening. It admittedly doesn't have the mass appeal of the other blockbusters on this list, and is definitely a much more mellow experience, but for me personally, it has all the makings of a masterpiece. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. That's going to do it for my ranking of every sci-fi movie directed by Steven Spielberg. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. And if you've seen any Spielberg movie or want to provide your own ranking, feel free to do so in the comments down below. I've been Nathan Orenstein with The No Show. Thanks for watching.